Hi. Cybersecurity is simple. Now, let me elaborate on that, of course. So, we make difficult, and every organization have a different way to look at a cybersecurity. Bottom line is, you are managing risk in your organization. And what we disagree with is how we manage that risk, how we identify the threats, so on and so forth. So every company has a different culture, has a different management style. So that is basically what make the topic very complex. So here we have emerging threats and countermeasures, and that is the way we approach these topics in academia world, but how we translate these researches that we are seeing nowadays into actually corporate speaking, corporate implementation of that. And if you do any search on how to create a vulnerability program on your organization, you will see a ton of things. If you do a search on how to manage risk on a corporate environment, you're going to get a ton of things as well. So to keep it simple, I'll provide you a few tips. First of all, if you're doing by risk, one way to look at it, remember, you are there to protect the organization so the organization can continue living, making money, providing products, and serving the community. If you have that in mind, you will secure in a priority list, right? You're there to secure everything. But on a priority list, I bet you the top ones on your list will be those systems that actually support that vision, support that mission of continue supporting the community, providing products and services to your stakeholders and clients and customers, and of course, generating revenue to the organization. So why not start protecting these systems first, identify them, inventory them, not only the hardware, but also the software that are in them, risk rank them. Yes, there's a priority, but there's some systems that are more important than the others. Prioritize them, and they will be your first hit list of how to protect. And then you broaden your scope in every other system in your organization, because you always have that argument. Well, if that lower system get compromised and the attacker can laterally move across the network and gain access to this critical system, yes, value argument. I won't deny it. However, for that to happen, a lot of things on your security program must go wrong, or you don't have them implemented. Because that movement, 9 out of 10, if it's not an advanced persistent threat, which get foothold in your organization, stay quiet, move quietly around, basically has time on their side, and of course, with time, and because an APT, they also well-financed. Most of these movements are going to be loud. There's going to be scanning on a network, trying to find vulnerabilities and exploit them. The exploit is noisy as well. So a lot of things you either don't have implemented or it went wrong on your program. So yes, the lateral movement argument within the network is a valid one. But once again, putting reality into perspective, a lot of things must go wrong and a lot of things must go right to the attacker as well. So having that in mind, protecting the most critical, identifying the most critical, at least not only the hardware, but also the software. Don't forget the software. If you look in the NIST cybersecurity framework, the first two controls there in the function of identify is identify the hardware and identify the software. And perhaps I'm paraphrasing here, but basically it is hardware and software. You can go and read it. And most people just, identify, here's a server, here's a Windows server, a Linux server, a Unix server, and here's the database, and there it is. And that's where you stop. But you need to go a little deeper. You need to do the software, and then you need to risk rank them, understand the risk perspective these system has an impact on your organization. So keep it simple. And bite little as possible so you can chew it. Because you will get overwhelmed when you have 3,000, 5,000, 30,000 systems. And even if you're a small business, you have 15, 20 systems, it gets overwhelmed because it's not only the quantity of the system that you have to see, it's the staff that you have on board of your company to protect. Yes, you might have, oh yes, easy, I only have 30 systems, but you have one admin. Is a lot to work with. Now I have 3,000 systems, well, but I have only 5 admins there, 5 security personnel. So it's not only one factor for you to look at it, yes, is the volume. But the second factor is, do you have the qualified staff? And not only qualified, do we have the quantity of staff to make that happen? So keep it simple, little bites in, here and there, bite size for you to protect. So we're focusing on those systems that have an impact on the mission, vision, and corporate objectives the organization has to continuously deliver the product and service for your shareholders and stakeholders and clients and so forth. So having that. Now, when you see vulnerabilities, identify on those systems and trust me, the formula we're going to use here, the approach we're going to use here, you're going to use in every other system in your organization. So all my conversation is going to be focused on those critical systems. But the formula is the same. So once you identify the vulnerabilities on those systems, how you patch them, how you go about them, well, it varies. There's different views, and I'll speak a little bit about these different views. So if you are a cybersecurity risk subject matter expert, you will see risk as risk to the systems. And you see these threats that realize on your network, the risk will realize. So you see sort of a doom perspective of the network world. But there are differences where these critical systems are actually sitting or exposed to. Example, you have a vulnerability that you found in one of your critical systems that are internal to your organization, and that is a remote code execution. Let's pick on that one. And then you say, wow, this is a very critical vulnerability. We need to patch like yesterday. The thought is valid, and we appreciate your eagerness. However, is on an internal network. Remember what I said before. To an attacker, take advantage, an external attacker, take advantage of that vulnerability. A few things must go wrong. First of all, let's think through the scenario. An attacker got into your organization through spear phishing, which is one of the most commons nowadays. That's the attack vector. Got in. Once it got foothold off that desktop, it has to gain foothold perhaps on one of the servers on a network. To do that, you're going to have to scan, find the vulnerabilities, or listen on the network for a credential flying around. You take over that, you get foothold in that system, and then you're going to download a few things for you to work with, or you're going to live off the land. That system contains compilers that you need, contains codes that you need. Great. Let's assume even that. But you're going to have to continue scanning the network. Remember, you're an outsider. You don't know. You don't even know if I have that remote code execution vulnerability. You don't know. I know. But you're an outsider. You don't know. So let's say you're scanning for that particular vulnerability. Now you're going to have to scan my network to find out which system, because once again, now that you're scanning, I'm making easier for the attacker, right? Now you're scanning exactly for that vulnerability. And you're going to have to scan my network to find where it is. Once you find where it is, which is going to be quite noisy if you're scanning the network, and then once again, a lot of things must go wrong because you're not picking up none of this so far. You will have to find out where it is, then exploit it. If not, now we find out, now you're going to have to download the payload to exploit it. So there's a lot of things, once again, that must go wrong. So that remote code execution on an internal server will be seen differently if that same vulnerability is on the outside system, facing outside on your DMZ that can be reached from the external without breaking it into your network in the first place through spear phishing or whatnot. So that one, although the same thing, same systems criticality, but now is in a DMZ sitting from outside. Now, yes, wake up somebody. Let's work on that weekend. Let's making sure that that got patched right away, because the attacker actually don't have to break in anything, don't have to steal credentials from anyone, is exposed from the outside, and it is a remote code execution. So same vulnerability, different ways to treat, different ways to evaluate on the same network, on the same solution. Keep it simple. Let's recap a little bit. So you identify those critical systems in the organization. Now you have to identify the vulnerabilities. You identify vulnerabilities through this use case scenario that we just walked through. You have now external systems versus internal systems. That's your first, perhaps, triage of, I found a vulnerability, where it is, on an external system and an internal system. And then we're going to have to classify that. Now, is internal system, you say, yes, that is very critical, but you have to pass through these many layers of security to get to it. And I'm only considering external threat. Now, if you have internal threats, you might have more problems than just this vulnerability, but let's keep a focus on that. So you have to pass through all this. I have to fail of detecting that attack or vulnerability or scanning on the network until I get there. But let's not diminish the criticality of that vulnerability and the criticality of the system impact to the company revenue. So let's call that a high. However, the one that is on a DMZ, let's call that a critical. And then you have to establish or execute on your company. What are the time frames for you to patch it? Critical, is that 24 hours? Is that 3 days? Why not? Because you need to patch that right away. And then internally, is a high? Is a high 7 days? 14 days? I don't know. It depends. Might depends on what? Well, it depends on a risk appetite of your company. And although you're not going to speak perhaps these words, you will be thinking about these words when you establish in collaboration with whoever patches the IT, the business, or what have you. When you start discussing timetables, they will unconsciously look about the risk appetite they have. Can I bring this down? Compare, let's say now we're in a critical time of the year for finance people. And when you're closing your budget finance cycle on your organization, that may be a calendar year, December, or that may be a financial fiscal year that usually is around September. Those time periods, the owners of those systems, or IT owners of those systems, custodian, are going to say, whoa. Yes, I understand it's very critical. Can we do something else? Put extra monitoring, put something in place so it can buy me more time so we finish this financial cycle and then be able to patch it? So that's one way to think of it. Because my risk appetite here is very little, because bringing the system down to patch it while we, working, burning the midnight oil here to close these financials in time is not worth it. So you will have discussion. Now, you as a cybersecurity professional say, well, how come? I mean, if you leave it there and it get compromised, now all of a sudden you will accept the risk that you was too high, I should have patched. Don't go down that road. Don't go punch for punch. Just understand that your customer, that department, the finance department, is your customer. Although you guys are probably co-workers, going to lunch together every week and so on and so forth. Now, they are, for all cases and purpose, your customer. And you have to make sure your customer is happy, but you have returning business. So consider and view them as such. If they say I cannot do this, is not, coordinate what is an acceptable time period to do that. Understand have sympathy, put yourself in their shoes, understand the pressure they are having, understand also the criticality. They have to understand the criticality and your urgency. When both of you understand each other at that level, come up with something that is reasonable. Both sides will eventually compromise. Right? It's not one side versus both sides are going to compromise a little, but understand that is based on risk appetite. Those are sort of emerging items, but also you have your regular vulnerability. So remember, you can put these vulnerabilities in about 3 buckets or 4, because you can consider these criticals in 0 days, basically expose the outside and remote code execution, privilege escalations and so forth, that is on systems that are facing outside, that can be compromised from the outside, don't need to break in on your network, are critical. Then you can consider the ones that are high, so your second bucket, right? The ones that are high. Then you have the ones that are part of your cyber hygiene. You need to patch on a regular basis to maintain the systems, all the systems at a particular level. So those you consider, those are the buckets. You can divide them and have that conversation and understanding with the folks on your organization, so you can establish a timetable so everybody understand. Everybody understand when you come to those parts that you start sending, you need to patch this, they understand your team, their team, what the timetable we're talking about. Does all that make sense? It's not that cybersecurity is difficult. It's that we make it difficult because we have different views. I just explain a simplistic view to protect your network. Although it might seem complex, it's very simplistic. Identify the critical systems that impact your corporate objectives. Categorize them between internal and external, if any. Then see the vulnerabilities that come in and the external being treated as more critical than the ones internal. So the one is outside is critical, the ones inside is high. Understand your defenses and work with your customers, right? Your coworkers, your business units, your business areas, and establish a timetable to patch. And that is only vulnerability, right? Now you're doing a risk case assessment on that environment. You will have more stuff. You will have vulnerabilities on the devices, vulnerabilities on the software. Then you're going to understand the network protocols that are open or closed, encrypted, not encrypted. Then you're going to understand what the users are there. Are the accounts there supposed to be there? The employee even works in a company for those accounts. Make sure that they are deleted or closed or what have you. You have further assessments to do. So, in a holistic program, there's more. But if you start simplistic like this, but comprehensively, don't confuse simple with simplistic, right? Don't confuse that being I'm not caring, or I'm hyperly focused on this area and forget about the rest of it. No. You start simple like this, and then you continue expanding, and having that rapport with the units that you work with. Once again, the best way to see them as customers that are paying for your services, and you have your own consulting company, right? You need that returning revenue. If you think like that, you will treat them a little bit different. You will find a way to make them happy, and at the same time, you make them understand your peculiar situation, because it's a two-way street. And I bet you 9 out of 10 you find a common area to work with. Does that make sense? Well, once again, like I said, cybersecurity is simple. Just do not overcomplicate.